Hi, Terry Kuti here today with DiepCfoundation. I have the honor and privilege of talking to Margaret Prophet. Margaret, welcome today.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to have you. Margaret and I have something in common. We are both BRCA carriers. However, as all of you are, however, Margaret has a BRCA gene mutation. Now, I want to give you just a brief description, and then we're going to let her tell your story. So, as I said, we all have the BRCA gene. They are human genes, and they produce tumor suppressor proteins. They help repair damaged DNA, and they play a role in the stability of a cell's genetic material. So, when that BRCA gene is mutated or altered, then the DNA damage may not be properly repaired, and that can lead to additional gene mutations or gene alterations, and it could lead to a possible cancer like breast cancer. So the risk goes up significantly then if you have a BRCA gene mutation. I'm going to let Margaret tell her story.
So I found out that I was BRCA positive, and I carry the BRCA2 mutation about 9 years ago when my mom was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 53. And my grandmother had died of cancer fairly young. She was 39. And so as soon as my mom had cancer, they thought, well, you need to get tested.
Strong family history.
Exactly, yeah. And so I was living in another state at the time, but the hospital that my mother was getting treated at was actually associated with Myriad Genetics, where who owned the test at the time, and so they offered to have me come and be tested there for free. Didn't have to involve insurance or anything like that. And so I took them up on it, came up and sort of helped my mom with her cancer treatment, and waited around 2 weeks for this. At the time, it was a blood test that I took, and it came back, and I met with a genetic counselor, and my mom was there with her bald head, and I remember thinking, like, I'm a lucky person. I have a 50-50 chance of getting my dad's non-mutated gene. Maybe I'll be lucky. And I was not lucky that day. The genetic counselor let me know that I was positive, and at the time I was young. I think I was 24, and I had two young kids. I had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and it was a lot to take on. And I remember it was pretty devastating, but at the same time, I kind of put it on a shelf a little bit because
your mom was there with you.
Correct.
So
yeah.
You had a lot of information to process.
Yeah.
Plus, she was going through her own diagnosis.
Right. And
it's a lot.
It was hard for her too.
Absolutely.
You know, she felt a little bit of guilt, which I didn't understand until I found out I had it myself. Sure. And thought of my own children and having passed on the gene to them. So I went back home to my home state and didn't quite know what to do, but I had a really good OBGYN who put me in touch with a breast surgeon and a gynecological surgeon as well to take care of the ovarian side, because even though I don't have a strong history of a family history of ovarian, there is a significantly higher risk of ovarian cancer associated with the BRCA gene. And so,
absolutely.
Right. So all of a sudden I was on this new screening regimen because I knew I wasn't ready for prophylactic surgeries. I knew I wanted to have a few more children. And so what I started was a screening regimen that was about every 6 months I would do something. I would either have an MRI on my breasts or a mammogram. And same thing with my ovaries. Every 6 months, a transvaginal ultrasound in my ovaries. Then,
so you chose monitor.
I chose monitoring for the time, yeah.
Right, because you were young, you wanted more children.
Right.
Completely understand.
Exactly. And I had breastfed 2 of my children, and knew that I wanted to keep my breasts around to breastfeed other children. And so, again, kind of shelved it. But it definitely was always lurking there, a little bit of anxiety. But in the meantime, my mom beat cancer. She was, hit her 5-year mark, right?
Awesome.
It was cancer-free. And so kind of life continued on. I kept doing these screenings, and I was fairly regular. But again, I had 2 more babies. And so the screening would change a little bit with nursing and with having babies, but I was fairly consistent. And then about back in August, about 4 months ago, my sister, who is also a BRCA2 carrier, and had also chosen surveillance like me. She's 2 years older than I am. She's 35 and I'm 33. She discovered a lump, and this was about 4 months after a breast MRI had come back totally clean. And so she had a very fast-growing and very aggressive breast cancer that had developed in a very short amount of time, despite her being very vigilant about her screenings.
How's she doing, Margaret?
She just finished her chemotherapy, and
Awesome.
she has her mastectomy scheduled for about 2 weeks from now. And she's doing good. I mean, she is sick, but she's going to beat this. I know it. She's cancer-free as of now. The treatment was really effective.
That's good.
Just as fast as it came on, it also retreated pretty fast.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
It sounds like she caught it early.
Right.
And I think the important thing, like you said, you and your sister both chose the surveillance method, which you can do as long as you're diligent about it, as long as you have that healthcare team that you talked about. So you've made a decision to go ahead with your prophylactic mastectomy, and we're going to learn more about that in just a little bit. You gave some great information today about the origin of your diagnosis or the beginnings of it and how you handled it with surveillance. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We'll hear more about your story in the next video.